Warning, if you have a fear of high schoolers with multiple personalities, clueless police officers, and/or psychopathic bitches with knives, this review may not be for you, and viewer discretion is advised. Okay, now that all the police-loving schizophobics who are also fearful of women with sharp objects have left the room, it's time we start this review. I feel whenever I watch the first installment of a series, I go into it with a certain amount of uncertainty, not really knowing what to expect. For me, the空の境界series was just that. Upon viewing the first film, Overlooking View, I found myself quite uncertain about what to expect, but as the film progressed, I found myself more and more interested in this dark world presented in空の境界. I mean, from the mystery, the characters, and the story surrounding it all, I knew I'd found a true masterpiece. So after watching what I consider to be a marvel of animation, I approached the second空の境界film with a fair amount of caution and hesitation, for the simple reason that I had no idea how anything could match the atmosphere, the complex storytelling, and the oh-so-interesting characters that I was introduced to in the Overlooking View. So, today on Holden Reviews, a review of the second空の境界film, Murder Study Part 1. Directed by Takuya Nonaka and animated by ufotable and originally premiered in theaters December 29th, 2007. So, is the sequel able to meet the expectations that were set after the first film? Find out as I take you on a tour of the dark yet oh so beautiful world of空の境界Murder Study Part 1. Our story takes place 3 years before the events of Overlooking View, and we are shown Mikia Kakuto as he walks through the snow with his umbrella, because that's like the perfect time for an umbrella, right? Until he surprises himself when he stumbles upon a girl wearing a kimono. She's beautiful, and she has a beckoning gaze upon her eyes, and once her gaze meets his, without even knowing it, he falls in love with her right then and there. Not too long after his high school entrance ceremony, it is there Mikia by chance happens to reunite with this mysterious beauty. Her name is Shiki Ryogi. She's unsociable and prefers others to keep their distance from her, but as Mikia reaches out to her, she ever so slowly begins to open up to him. Soon after that, Shiki informs Mikia that she's not been entirely honest with him, and decides to confess that her body not only houses one personality, but two. Shiki and Shiki, which are both extremely different from one another, despite having the same name. Meanwhile, in the city, there's a series of extremely grotesque and equally strange murders continuing. With very little evidence to go on and an unclear motive, police haven't got a clue what they're dealing with. And so, Mikia soon finds himself between a rock and a hard place as he soon begins to realize that the very girl he's fallen in love with is maybe a bit more dangerous than he thought. Now, in my opinion, story-wise, this movie is a great improvement from Overlooking View, mostly due to the fact that since Murder Study Part 1 takes its place at the very beginning of the storyline rather than right in the middle like in Overlooking View. So, since it starts at the very beginning, it allows for the characters to become more developed in my opinion, and allows for a more overall enjoyable experience. The story is still very dark and rather complex, and not to mention full of mysteries. The plot on paper seems like it would be extremely boring. I mean, in essence, it's a story about a boy who falls in love with a girl, talks to the girl, and they find out stuff about each other that they were probably better off not knowing. Now that all seems really simple right now, and you may be wondering how is it possible that they can make these events interesting, but let me assure you that it is very interesting, and to be completely honest, I found that the 1 hour length of this movie to fly by and never really seemed to drag on. The pacing for this film was great, the plot was interesting, and it shed some light on the origins of how exactly Shiki and Mikia came to meet one another and get to know each other. All in all, I found the plot of Murder Study Part 1 much easier to follow than Overlooking View, and I felt that as a result, the story felt more compelling in this film than its predecessor. Story receives an 8.1. Also, on a side note, after messing up the chronological order in my first review, I would like to correct myself and say the correct chronological order for this film series is actually 2, 4, 3, 1, 5, 6, 7. Now, do I recommend watching it in said order? The answer is no, reason being is part of the beauty of空の境界comes from piecing the mystery together as you watch it. To further back up my opinion, I would also like to point out that if it was meant to be watched in such an order, it would have been released in that order. But it wasn't, so don't watch it in that order. That aside though, let us continue with this review. The characters of this gloomy movie are, in my opinion, what really made this rather simplistic plot seem more interesting. The first main character of Murder Study Part 1 is Mikia Kakuto, who is a young high school student who falls in love with a girl and upon reuniting with her tries to get to know her a little better. Now, I feel that Mikia is portrayed as very innocent in this film, and maybe due to the fact that he's just in love, but I felt that his innocence and the way that he was portrayed as innocent made you as the audience sympathize with him, because you just knew that no matter what he found out about Shiki, he would still love her and believe in her, even though he has no basis for believing in her in the first place. Overall, I feel that it was his character and how he viewed the events that were unfolding around him that made the pace of the movie as good as it was, so in the end, he was a really good character. The only other important character in this film was the mysterious and beautiful girl, Shiki Ryogi. Now, I feel that in this film, her character is not as much as an emotionless, knife-wielding killer, but rather just a misunderstood girl. I mean, sure, she can still be a bit, psychopathic at times, but it's all explained and we're given good reason as to why that is. The thing I liked most about Shiki in this film, in contrast to Overlooking View, was that she seemed more like a normal girl at various moments in this movie, which is depicted by her spending time with Mikia, be it eating lunch on the rooftop or just waiting out in the rain. Her relationship with Kokuto just makes her character take on a whole new persona, a persona which I thoroughly enjoyed. The characters of Murder Study Part 1 receive a very good 8.6. The animation of空の境界Murder Study Part 1 is truly a sight to behold. The animation is done by Studio ufotable and has once again proved why they are considered by many to be one of the best, if not the best, animation studio currently out there. This film in particular uses a lot of effective techniques to give this film a look that is truly a landmark in animation. The use of gradients to shade gives a visually soft look to the objects in which that they used it on, due to the amount of colors you get when you use a gradient. There is cell shading as well, but all the cell shading and highlighting were done in a way that really comes off as nothing more than a shadow or a highlight on said object, rather than just a blob of color that greatly contrasts the base color, and as a result just looks visually appalling. The backgrounds look absolutely phenomenal at points and look so picturesque you would swear you were looking at a photo rather than a background that was painted. Another thing that I thought was amazing was the lighting in this series, which was utterly remarkable. It diffused perfectly, never having solid lines between the lightness and the darkness on the environment. It was both used for mechanical light sources such as streetlights and natural light sources such as the sun and the moon. This way of making light seem and react in such an authentic way really added to the overall immersion in this film. The character animation is smooth and fluid even in scenes of high intensity and never really seems to slip up at all. The character designs by Type Moon I think are great in this anime, since I find that they have the perfect balance of being anatomically correct while still retaining the iconic anime look to them. In the end, this anime is something that really is meant to be watched in HD, and you'll be committing a wrongdoing to this series and yourself by watching it anything less than HD. Animation receives an outstanding 9.7. The soundtrack for Murder Study Part 1 is an absolutely perfect fit for the overall tone of this anime. One of the major differences between the soundtrack of this film and the previous film is that this movie's soundtrack has a few more tracks that feel more upbeat and happy to them, to reflect the carefree happy days of their youth while they were still in high school. Another thing I liked about the soundtrack was the use of songs that were simply there to complement the environment and accompanied scenes of just landscape or everyday objects. There's also a fair amount of tracks that give the listener a sense of uneasiness, or rather just seem unnerving, and it is tracks like these that really add to the overall dark tone of this film. My personal favorite aspect of the soundtrack is just the sheer elegance and beauty that some of the songs give off. The emotionally invoking pianos, the elegant sound of the string instruments resonating, the sweet tender cries of the woodwinds as they proceed to take us out of this world and into their own. This soundtrack, if anything, has a good balance of songs and doesn't in any way sound by any stretch of the word generic. Every song complements the scene it is used in perfectly and really just adds to the emotion on screen, as any good soundtrack should. So I give the soundtrack of Murder Study Part 1 a great 9.0. Now I stand firm in my thought that this movie is meant to be watched after Overlooking View, despite the events of this movie taking place before the events in Overlooking View. And my reason for this is, like I said before,空の境界was released in the order it was for a reason. So I believe that tampering with the order is a travesty to the series and to the creators who spent the time crafting such a marvelous story. With all that being said, I would just like to say, this movie was a great time to watch. It made me think, it made me feel sympathy, and above all else, it left me wanting more. Which in this case is not a bad thing since it's only the second of the 7-part series. The reason I found this film so compelling was the fact that it wasn't afraid to tell the mature story it told. Or rather, it treats the viewers like mature adults and doesn't simplify anything in order to cater to a larger, less mature audience, which in anime is a very rare find. I applaud Murder Study Part 1 for this, and if you're looking for a mature story, I would definitely give this movie a look, but not before watching the first one, of course. This second installment in the空の境界series is everything I could have hoped for and more.空の境界Murder Study Part 1 is a tale of darkness that enlightens us on the origins of the characters and how they came to be, and wow, what a remarkable tale it is. Enjoyment receives a very good 8.3, making the final score for空の境界Murder Study Part 1 an incredible 8.74 and receives a stamp of Holden approves. So that's it for this review of空の境界Murder Study Part 1. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, be sure to like this video, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. Also, be sure to leave your comments, questions, and recommendations in the comments section below. So, I'm Holden from HoldenReviews, and until next time, sayonara, see you later.